Revelation 2835. From the 3rd of August 1943. Increased measure of sufferings and hardships. The world will still have to go through boundless misery, for the time given to people for final redemption is nearing its end. They still have to endure much suffering and struggle unspeakably, for it is a struggle with the forces of the underworld from whose influence they shall liberate themselves. This liberation can only be possible with the support of good forces, with the help of God, who therefore has to be called upon because his strength and help cannot reach people without being asked as long as they do not acknowledge God and his working of love. However, humanity is very stubborn and cannot find the path to God by itself, therefore they are approached by suffering and adversity to such an extent that they are, as it were, forced onto the path which leads to God, that they have to turn to him in prayer because they have no other earthly way out. And yet the majority of people pass him by and thus increase the measure of suffering and hardship. And God's mercy now reaches for the last means to win over the few who have not yet decided. He allows a disaster to befall the earth which was not caused by human will, although human will, because it is turned away from God, is the indirect cause of the event. He determines the elements of nature to extraordinary activity. He expresses himself in such a way that people are once again forced to take a stand towards God, that they can easily establish the right relationship with him if their souls are not completely hardened. Divine will determines the time, and his power expresses itself when an earthly low has been reached which necessitates divine intervention. The hard trials beforehand are likewise a possibility to establish the right relationship with God, and blessed is he who does this, even though he thereby loses his earthly life. He is then protected from complete darkness as soon as he enters the spiritual kingdom. Earthly suffering is not as agonizing as a state of complete darkness is in the beyond. Suffering on earth, however, takes on forms that would have to shake the entire human race in its thinking, for it is confronted with changes in living conditions that seem unbearable to it. Yet even then the eternal deity will still not be recognized. Indeed, the great suffering will still contribute to denying him completely. But these people are already so far from God that there is no salvation for them in this redemption period. They will have to take the path on earth once more and start it again in hardest matter, which is inconceivably agonizing. Yet their will determines itself and entails the consequences, for if the human will is still not broken in a time of greatest adversity and earthly tribulations, if it still does not submit itself to the eternal deity, then God's merciful love has to resort to other means in order to still transform this will. He must bind it again in the form so that it may desire freedom. And this is a new redemption period which will soon begin and thus signifies the end of the old earth, which is imminent. Amen.